Navigating social situations without anxiety or emotional overload can be a challenge, even for neurotypical kids and their parents. Throw in some of the challenges exceptional kids face, especially around regulating emotions and connecting interpersonally, and the stakes get higher. A seemingly small outing can feel anything but small. In this podcast, we have the opportunity to chat with an expert in this field, Elizabeth Sautter, author of Make Social and Emotional Learning Stick: Practical Strategies to Help Your Child Manage Emotions, Navigate Social Situations, and Reduce Anxiety. Elizabeth is also a mom, a speech therapist, and a co-owner of Communication Works, a company that provides speech therapy to schools and individuals in the San Francisco Bay Area. Together, we have a lot we can learn from Elizabeth. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Elizabeth. First, can we start off, can you talk a little bit about what brought you to this work? I imagine that will start with you telling us about your sons and what are they like and how they have influenced your path.
Yeah, actually, thank you so much for having me here today. And actually, it didn't start with my sons. It started way before that. My sons having learning differences and I call it additional needs, complexities in terms of navigating the system, what we call school, right? Mm-hmm. But it started with my sister. I have an older sister who is what they call developmentally delayed back mm-hmm. then. So she's globally delayed in all areas: language, cognition, physically, all of it. Mm-hmm. And so she was older than I was, and it wasn't even until my parents had me that they realized that she was delayed because I was progressing faster than she was. Mm-hmm. So we grew up in Oakland, California, and we were both in public schools, and she was in special education. And, my parents went to all the individual education plans and had lots of specialists. And, I was in waiting rooms for many years. We had occupational therapy equipment in our basement. And mm-hmm. So it was just something that was really familiar to me and stressful, really, really stressful, but familiar to me. And I knew that when I went to school, I wanted to be in the helping profession, either nursing or teaching. And then I learned about the field of speech therapy. And I took a class outside of my major. So anybody listening out there and encouraging your kids to do things that are outside of what they think they want to do, just let them go, because it's so. The teacher was a speech pathologist in this communicative disorders and sciences class that I took that sounded interesting. And I just fell in love. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do, I could be in the classroom, I could be in the hospitals. There's so many things that you can do as a speech pathologist. And actually a little plug for May is coming up here. I know people will be listening any time of the year in May, but maybe even later or different times. But May is Better Speech and Hearing Month. And we're doing a lot around, building awareness around that. And, I have a company where we're a group of speech therapists, and we talk about helping others communicate and connect. Anyway, so I was sold on the field of speech therapy right after that. And I got my master's and then did my interns and clinical fellowship work. We have to work under a licensed professional for a year, and I did that. And then actually in graduate school, I raised my hand instead of writing a paper, they said, would anybody want to take a client? And I said, yes, me. And that client happened to have autism. Mm-hmm. And I just became extremely fascinated about autism and social communication and our role as speech pathologists with behavior and communication. And I worked for a school with severely impaired children with autism behaviors, the kids who actually would have been institutionalized if there weren't these schools, their behaviors just couldn't be managed in the public school setting. And I loved that job, interdisciplinary approach. And then I started doing a little bit of work on the side privately for kids who had perspective taking, social thinking challenges, and learning through a expert, Michelle Garcia Winner, and her work, and just running social groups. And that just grew. And that's how my company Communication Works grew, is just out of the interest in wanting to help kids with social communication challenges and perspective taking issues. So we grew a center with occupational therapists and educational therapists and speech therapy and groups. And then we also sprinkled our work into the schools. And so it's just expanded from there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're on the right path and you're really passionate about it. And I love that you kind of happened upon your field in college. I also agree that when you're in college, you shouldn't just stick to one thing, because even if you think that you want to do it, just explore, just be open. Okay,
Yes.
So before we get into your book, can you tell me a little bit more about Communication Works specifically, and speak a little bit more about what you do to help the schools in your area?
Yeah. So Communication Works is a local organization here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we used to have a center in Oakland that I mentioned. And now we're focused more on the schools. Mm-hmm. I do consultation to the center, but it grew too much. So we had to pick and choose. And right around the time that my two boys were having their own struggles, I was having a hard time, being there in the afternoons and the weekends when all the other parents could come after school and whatnot. So that's in the hands of somebody else, but now we're focused on school-based speech therapy. And so a lot of the schools in the San Francisco Bay Area, it's hard to find speech therapists and support them in the ways that they need. Yeah. So we've developed a system and an organization to really hone in on just speech therapy. And so we hire the speech therapists and we place them at the schools that need therapy. And then they see the kids on at the various schools that have services for speech and language. Mm-hmm. And we work on anything from expressive language, being able to articulate and be fluent with your speech and have the vocabulary to express your thoughts and feelings and emotions and desires. And then also to understand the language processing piece of it, receptive language. So there's a lot that we do to support children to be able to access the curriculum academically and also flourish socially so that they can meet their goals and whatnot. So that's a little bit of Communication Works. And I think that what I love about being solely focused on speech therapists, in the public school system, there's so much, and they have to employ and manage and support and train so many different people. And the speech therapist, there's usually just one at the school. Maybe they're even only there like a couple of days a week. Wow. And so having an organization that you can lean on that has materials and resources and training and our own HR and all the different things that is just for you, then they can go and be in these schools and really feel supported and do their job and thrive. Which, if you don't have water in your own pitcher as a teacher, as a therapist, as a parent, then, we really can't give to the children and people around us who need our services.
So I'm curious, how do the teachers, or who decides who needs speech therapy usually at school?
So we have milestones of development, typical development. Mm-hmm. And so we're always watching out for that, preschool teachers and parents to, making sure that we talk a lot about walking and crawling and sitting and all those things, but then becomes the talking. And even before that, the gesturing and, even the ba, the for bottle and the approximations and the gestures, that's all communication. So we want to be looking out for that at a very early age. Mm-hmm. And when a child is not meeting those milestones is when a teacher, it could be anybody, a parent, a nanny, an aunt, an uncle, whoever, should then, say, this child is crying a lot, but not asking for things that they need, or pointing, or they don't really play with other kids, or looking at me and gesturing and getting my attention. All of those things are red flags for seeking out an assessment and getting a child what they need. And sometimes it can happen very early, mm-hmm. and sometimes it can be, not until a child hits, more demands in the school system. Like that's what happened with my sons. It wasn't until my older son, when he was in third grade, when it turns from learning to read versus reading to learn, then it really became a challenge for him. So you can notice things at all different times. I'm actually starting to work with, I'm going to meet a 22-year-old male today who is, concerned because he has autistic-like social challenges. And he's saying, I'm worried my girlfriend's going to break up with me, so it can happen at any stage. And the brain is always changing and developing. So don't think it's ever too late.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
it. Or too early either.
Yeah.
Because early intervention really is key.
Yeah. So do teachers generally, these are public schools that you're in mostly?
Yes. Public schools that we're in, and some private schools and nonprofit schools and organizations. And then we do some private therapy as well, but mostly the public school systems. Yeah.
And teachers generally have like a basic understanding of what to look for in these speech milestones.
Yes, for sure. They're trained in that area. And then we can do screenings too as speech and language pathologists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I'm just curious, like, for kids to make sure that they are even prompted, that their parents might be prompted that they might need a screening.
Mm-hmm. I know. Yeah. I know. It's, some parents say like, oh, I was a late talker. It's okay. Or I was socially awkward too, or I was anxious, those kind of things. So a lot of times they just don't know. I mean, it's a lot to learn and understand and to educate parents. And that's, what our mission is. Actually, I'm working on right now with Communication Works, a whole handout and a PowerPoint to share with other speech pathologists so that they can train teachers and parents for what to look for. So that's going to be our whole mission for Better Hearing and Speech Month coming up here really soon, which is in May. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now on to make social and emotional learning stick. Why write the book and why now?
So I mentioned that we had a center in Oakland, and my passion was running those social groups. I just enjoyed it so much. And, we were fortunate to have the parents there. In the schools, you don't always have the parents, but in the private centers you do. And so mandatory to have the parents stay, and they would have their little support group in the waiting room, but they would always come in and get training from the therapist and myself for how to thread and embed this into their everyday routines and activities, because it really can't stay on the shoulders of the kids. It's not going to generalize out into the natural environment about how to have a conversation or how to think about others and be flexible and have breathing strategies. They need to be practiced at home. And so the parents were really appreciative of that. And some said, you should start a blog and you should write a book. And I said, okay, a little bit. At first I was like, I don't know how to do that. So I don't know how that's going to work. But then I started blogging a little bit. And then I had my own children and realized, wow, I thought that being a therapist was going to make me a better parent. But I was opposite, being a parent made me a better therapist. And so I started writing a little bit and putting together all those suggestions that we were giving to parents, and really realizing that there's so many opportunities in our everyday activities that parents can use for social emotional learning. And my kids, so my older son was struggling a bit and did get diagnosed with ADHD and learning differences and anxiety, and was getting support. And I too, even though I knew sometimes the homework was just sitting on the kitchen counter and I felt guilty that I wasn't doing it. But there are things that I started doing with him and the parents that I was supporting, just, cooking in the kitchen or sitting at the dinner table or things in the car, things where I was already spending time with him that could have the same function of building his executive functioning and pathways in his brain to help him with anxiety and things like that. So that's what really took it to the next level of, I'm going to write a book. And so I actually wrote the first book in 2014 and it was well received. And then this book that I just completed I wrote the second edition in 2000 20 in November. Because I just had learned so much. I've been practicing and teaching mindfulness. In the book, it's divided up into home, community, holidays, and special events, which are kind of the things that we do with our kids in our lives. But I really wanted to also add a section on bridging home and school, because I just think that that's so important for teachers. A lot of teachers obtain my book to be able to share it with parents, and for them to just have that bridge and a partnership between the two. So that's why the first book, and that's why the second book.
Awesome. So you just touched on, in your book, you teach parents, it includes strategies for parents to teach kids about empathy and mindfulness. Can you share a few of those strategies with us?
Absolutely. So I have in the book, it's, divided up into it's based on context. So like, here's the book actually. And then there's like, for instance, if I open it to a page, most pages, a quote, but okay, here's nighttime routines.
Yeah.
And so there's all these different sections on little squares, if you're listening and can't see this. And so and then at the bottom of each one of them, it's like, we call it the hidden social rules, because that's what helps kids feel more comfortable, is understanding what's expected in various situations. Mm-hmm. So, inspiring parents to say, what are the hidden rules of your bedtime routine, so that the kids can have that mapped out. Maybe they do want to make a schedule or whatnot. So you asked about mindfulness, and this is the perfect page for that. On this page, we have one of the boxes here teaches a parent how to do a body scan. So at nighttime, you can practice, thinking about one, going from your toes to your head, one body part at a time, and how to pay attention. What are the sensations that you feel? Is it tense? Might you want to relax it? How could you do that? And so that's one way to practice mindfulness. You can do mindful teeth brushing, brushing your teeth. And focusing on, each tooth at a time. You can do mindful eating at the dinner table. Just, tasting that butter on the broccoli and chewing it, the crunchiness, and really focusing on each little bite. And you can do mindful walking by, one step at a time. What does it feel like in your shoe? What do the different surfaces feel like? Mindful listening is really well known, whether it's, listening to a chime or a bell or music or the birds. Mm-hmm. So all of those things are practicing mindfulness. And then you asked about empathy. Oh, also too, one more thing about mindfulness for at nighttime, I teach parents about this all the time, is we want to teach belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, as opposed to shoulder and clavicle breathing, because that can make you more anxious and overstimulated. So putting a book or a stuffed animal on your belly at night and watching it go up and down.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, to just see, because a lot of kids struggle with that. So focusing on that. And then, so empathy, there's a lot of different activities in the book, even asking a child how their day was, to build that social reciprocity and caring about others. And then there's activities in the book about at school where you can have a friendship bench. There's activities where doing art activities with your children, to have a pen pal and checking in and asking how other people are. And there's a lot in the book about building perspective taking, which is all about empathy. Mm-hmm. So there's so many details. And in the front of the book, to make it easier, if parents have children who they already know are struggling in these areas, they can go to the front of the book, and I have a grid. Let me show you. I have a grid that maps out all the different areas that are covered in the book. So if you want to do it this way, where you can go to the different topics like emotional regulation, or I said executive functioning, or perspective taking, and then you can find out where the activities are that would cover those areas to support your child in developing those lagging skills, or just boosting the skills they already are in. And speaking of,
Is there a dog in the background?
Yes, I was just going to say that's Lucy, Sheila. And just so you know, pets, there's a whole couple of pages on pets and how animals can actually help with emotional regulation, and then how you can clue in so that, child can help. We have, dogs help kids with anxiety and all kinds of challenges. So that the dogs can actually help the child and the person, but also we can learn from the dog, like by watching their nonverbal, or Lucy's not being nonverbal, her verbal cues, right? Like what's going on? She's distressed, somebody at the door. Those are all social inferences that we're making all the time, but we don't think to say, like, what do you think Lucy's thinking? What should we do? Oh, we should go see. She's looking at us. She's looking at the door. That's joint attention. Oh, that, maybe there's somebody at the door. All of that is social emotional learning in the moment. Yeah.
Practical too.
Very.
And just a bunch of activities that you can, or suggested or prompts maybe.
Yeah. And just to get Exactly. And just to get parents thinking, inspiring them to think in these ways and realize that, that particular situation with Lucy and the dog is a social situation, and getting them clued into that. Well, let's calm her down. How do we know to calm her down? Let's take some deep breaths and pet her. What is she like? That's all about relationship building and awareness. First is observation, and then cluing in with the strategies. So.
Love it. Can you tell me a little bit more about the hidden rules and how that affects kids socially?
Yeah. So I mentioned a little bit, and that's why I have that at the bottom of each of the page of my book. Since it's context-based, it can help inspire parents. I wrote some of the things that are, maybe what we do at the dinner table, or some of the social, I don't like to use the word expectations, but what are typically happening at the dinner table or in the car, all these different contexts. But what happens sometimes, and we don't realize the complexity of social, is that it's not just using our words and our gestures and our actions, but it's also the observations of what's happening around us, and then we choose what words and actions to use when we can understand that and have an idea of what that is, and that's part of what we teach. Children are learning these predictabilities very early on. And when a child is developing with the milestones that are expected for the brain development around social emotional learning, they pick up on learning that, maybe you wash your hands after you eat. I mean, that's probably told to them, but there are other things too, like that you pull up your pants before you walk out of the bathroom, or that, sharing a toy makes other people feel happy. They probably learned that when somebody else didn't share a toy or whatever. And all these different ways of doing things, the kids are watching and learning around them. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And, or maybe as it gets more complex, it just gets harder and harder. And so we call that situational awareness. And building awareness of the context. And that's why I wrote my book with the context in mind, to be able to teach within those contexts. And so what we can do is we can help children look around, and that's why the mindfulness is so important too, is be mindful of what they see and hear and smell and all those things, to make social inferences and guesses, and to then know what to say and do to achieve their goal in these various situations, whether that's having a conversation and connecting with a peer, or whether that's, completing an assignment in school, or whatever it might be. A child has to be aware that all the other kids are lined up and going out to recess or lunch, so that they can stop their art activity. Oops, it's time to go outside. Maybe they missed the verbal cue, or that, that learning the rules of being at a birthday party, like it's expected that the birthday person blow out the candle, even though it looks like so much fun, that's not your role, or that you want to put your finger in the birthday cake so badly, but, the expectations are to wait. And sometimes kids actually don't know that. They're not trying to have unexpected or
rude
behavior. I try to leave the judgment out of it, so we don't judge these kids, and just
Okay.
get curious a little bit about, that's interesting. I wonder if they might not know that would make the birthday person feel
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. And so these are the things that we can teach. Why, teaching mindfulness and being able to pause and build that awareness, and
Mm-hmm.
then layer on the hidden social rules that they might have not known. I have
Mm-hmm.
a funny story around this, actually. In one of my social groups, I had a teenage group a while back, and what we were talking about, gift giving. Gift giving is a huge um, opportunity for social emotional learning, because oftentimes now in these day and age too, all we do is go on Amazon and buy a gift. Well, I would really encourage parents to get the kids involved. We used to be able to go to the toy stores and pick something out, but
Yeah.
if you can't go to the toy stores because of whatever reason, then even if you're on Amazon, take these opportunities to think about what the birthday person, what age they are, what their interests are, what things that they might have in common that they know that person likes to think and talk about and do, because that's all perspective taking and awareness of somebody else when you're buying a gift. So you can use Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays, to Christmas, holidays, whatever it might be, Hanukkah, all the holidays, to help your child buy the gifts and build, awareness of what that person might want. But the funny story was, we used to do this a lot in our social groups. And this one boy came back, and we always do a little like sharing of the week about something that happened in your actual social world. And he said, "Oh, I was so confused. I went to this birthday, and I really thought that my gift was perfect. All the things we've talked about, like something that I like, that he might need and find useful. And, I wrapped up my favorite deodorant that, I've been loving and using. And I just really thought that he would love it too. And everybody thought it was like a joke, and they were laughing." And he didn't understand that you don't typically give, and here's the thing, you don't typically give hygiene products for, a teenage birthday party.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, for a girl, that's the other hit. They're so complex, right? Like maybe girls would give another girl lotion or something
Yes.
like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you might not give shampoo. But how do you understand that, right?
So confusing.
It's so confusing.
You're talking about the most basic ones, but I feel like there's been a lot more social, I guess, situations and things that people need to now think about.
Oh,
Like layering on. I can't even keep up with them myself, I suppose, unless you're watching the news all the time or something. I don't know. But there's a lot of new ones. Some of them are wonderful, but then I don't know. It can be a lot. But you're just talking about the very basic that I think everyone needs to know and still doesn't always get.
yeah. And so I'm talking about the very basic for kids who really struggle, or people who really struggle
Yeah.
with picking those up. But there's also, we call it priming. It's actually an evidence-based strategy for
Okay.
children and kids with autism, but anybody really, is setting them up for success. And so even if it's not just the basic, like not getting deodorant for a birthday gift and not blowing out candles for somebody else's birthday, priming your child for where you're going. Like even if you're running errands, or like say you're going somewhere with your child, but you need to
Yep.
run an errand on the way home,
Okay.
and you didn't tell them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so say, "Oh," and then they're like, "Wait, why are we here? I want to go home. I have a Minecraft date with my friend," or whatever. And then you have a meltdown. And then
Yeah.
you think to yourself like, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell them." So priming them for what's to be expected can really help with, kids don't have much control over their schedules and lives. So setting them up and telling them what's coming ahead and priming them for success can, with the social rules or just the different schedules that's coming ahead, can also be another strategy for success.
That's a good one too, that I don't think I do enough of. I just maybe I just do what I do and the kids have to follow, but I'm not mindful myself of what it might be like for them.
Yeah, I mean, and just thinking about, being compassionate and whatnot too. Like I forget all the time, and we think like, oh, well, the kids should just do what we want to do. But imagine if we were in the back seat and had no control over our time or what we were doing. And, there's ways to make it fun and enjoyable to spend that kind of time together. But, letting them know and having them have some insight can be a nice way to model the social that we want our kids to become, which is a huge piece of social emotional learning too, is modeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I probably might say that might be one of the biggest. Yeah. Modeling.
Modeling is huge. Yeah. They're watching us all the time. We have these mirror neurons in our brains that are, whether we like it or not, our kids are little parrots, and it's like a sci-fi movie, right? This is like they're picking up on the things that we're doing and saying, and and being mindful. And one of the things that we teach in our course, in our community, we've turned the book. And I've partnered up with the school psychologist, Dr. Rebecca Branstetter, to develop an online course for parents to go deeper. We have a community as well for parents who have kids who are struggle in these areas. They might be neurodivergent. It starts with the parents in terms of self-care, because if you're supporting a child with social emotional challenges, they might have big emotions, they might shut down, and the best way to support them is by modeling your own self-care and showing up with your own calm and sharing your calm. I mean, a escalated parent cannot de-escalate a child, and sharing your calm, your voice, your validating their feelings and whatnot without blaming and shaming is the first piece in showing up and being there for them, which is part of modeling. That's why I got on that tangent. But self-care is a necessity. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have when parenting.
Yeah, I love that. What are some ways that parents can get their kids to focus on schoolwork without complaining?
That's a loaded question, right? And I have, a challenge with that at home. I think the biggest thing that I want to say there, because everybody's different, like for instance, my son has dysgraphia, which is writing challenges, and there's a whole slew of things that you can do for that. There's kids with dyslexia, and there's all the different language processing. So there's all these different ways that you could go down. And I would really recommend a specialist to hone in on your own child's specific needs. But in general, I think the best thing is two things that I would suggest. Well, two things that I would suggest, I'll stop with two, is one is to make sure that the child is calm and focused, because if a child is dysregulated in any shape, way, or form, their brain is offline. So if this is a model of the brain, Dr. Dan Siegel does a model of the brain with a hand and the fingertips covering the thumb. If you make like a fist like this, this is the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain. And you want the thinking part of the brain to be engaged for being able to focus and attend, because if they're daydreaming, it might be a little bit disengaged. If they're really dysregulated by something going on around them, a fight with their sibling or their parent, whatever, or they don't like the teacher or whatever, then their brain is flipping their lid. They can't access the synapses and the pathways in their brain to be able to focus and attend. So I would say making sure to realize if how can the child feel comfortable, and that could be by either having background noise, not having background noise, making sure they're comfortable in their chairs, and maybe they have a fidget, or maybe they have noise blocking headphones, or a focus folder where they have like a piece of cardboard around them so they're not distracted by other kids. All children are individual, and you have to really figure out what's going to work for each child. But I think that the regulation piece is where I would start, so that their mind and their body are regulated to be able to then even think about being focused. And the other thing that I was going to suggest is to really focus on making sure that children have a connection with the educator involved, and they feel comfortable and connected. If a teacher I have so many children where we've mapped out their day where they're struggling, and we looked at how they're struggling with regulation. And we said if they're not regulated, they're not able to focus and attend. But some of the kids, when they were down into like a lower level of arousal and not able to, like, almost falling asleep and whatnot, they're zoned out. They said, a lot of times they said, the teacher doesn't get me. They don't understand me. I feel uncomfortable around them, whatever. And the teacher's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, and it just takes a little bit of rapport building, maybe finding one commonality, or just, oh, I can talk to them after class, and just check in. It doesn't even have to be about what's going on in class. It can just be like, are you watching the A's? Oh my gosh, if one teacher asked my son right now if he was watching the A's, then he would just light up,
You mentioned your online course and community. Why did you develop this offering, and who does it help? Can anyone sign up for it from around the country?
Yeah, it's an evergreen, which means that it's out there and it's available for the access of all people. We developed it, as I mentioned, with Dr. Rebecca Brandsetter, who's an expert in executive functioning, and I have an expertise in the social emotional. Mm-hmm. And so we both have written books, and we wanted to make that, a lot of parents don't have the funding for individual consultation or for therapy. And I, learned so much from supporting my own children, and I've gotten so much therapy for them, and all the information that I put into my book and the cards, and also, that I give to parents that I'm seeing individually, and my clients that I'm seeing individually. And I benefited from so many other people's online courses, but there was nothing really like this out there for social emotional learning and executive functioning. And so Rebecca and I put together this pathway to make it really easily accessible. Like I mentioned, it starts with the parents, and then it looks at the environment and understanding your child, focusing on their strengths to build up their areas of lagging skills and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And then it goes into understanding fundamental needs and teaching some indirect, talking about mirroring and modeling and priming mm-hmm. and predictability, and then mindfulness and making the abstract more concrete. And then it goes into sprinkling on the everyday strategies. So it's a pathway, it's a process, it's a system that we have guided parents on. And you see all these books behind me. Well, if you're just listening, then you can't see the books. But we've mined all this information and put in evidence-based strategies to support children in these ways by empowering parents. There's just no guidebook, there's no handbook. So here you go. We wanted to provide this for you, and absolutely any parent can obtain this. It's primarily for parents who have a concern about their child's social emotional development, whether they have services already and they just want a little bit more awareness, or whether they're just starting out on the path and just want to discover a little bit more. So it can augment therapy, or it can be the start. And then there's a community as well of other like-minded parents who are going through the exact same things, so that you don't feel alone, because I know how that feels as a parent, supporting children. It's a whole nother job of mm-hmm. managing their learning needs and helping them navigate the school system and whatnot. And so you're not alone. And we want you to know that your child's not broken, and neither are you. And you're doing a great job just by listening right here. And so that's why we put this together. And it's actually, if you go to makesociallearningstick.com, it's available there, but you can click on the parent course, and there's actually a free mini course. We partnered with an amazing organization called Generation Mindful, and they've really helped us to get it out there, not only to their community, but our community and beyond. And it's been a really nice partnership. So that'll lead you to the free training on Generation Mindful, and then how to access the course if you'd like.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that your partner specializes in executive functioning. So is that mm-hmm. part of the course as well?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. They're all intertwined. We were actually originally going to do one mini course on social communication, and one on self-regulation or emotional regulation, and one on executive functioning. But what we found when we were doing, our mapping out of all the things we wanted to include, there was a lot of similarities in the strategies that we were going to provide. So we decided there's, as I mentioned, 10 universal strategies throughout the course that are evidence-based that support all of them. So you'll find them over, and so we just put them together in this pathway.
And I have one more question about the course. Well, two really. One is, what age range would you suggest that is like ideal? Is it for any parent, or like a parent kind of in this general, with kids in this general age range?
I would say it's definitely for elementary school children.
Okay.
But also there's a lot of parents in there of the preschool age and teenagers. We have, it's for all. I would say talk to teens. There's some of the activities are a little bit more cognitive in nature, so it might need a little bit more modification for the tots. And then the teenagers, you have to just know your teenager, and they're all concepts that can be absolutely used for teens and tweens. And I'm using them with my own children who are 14 and 17. And so it's for all ages, but sometimes parents need a little bit of coaching to see this is definitely for a teenager. I'll show you how, or this is definitely for a tot. I'll show you how.
I love it. Love it. Well, that sounds really awesome. Thank you so much for offering that. It's sometimes, that's really special to be able to just like learn how to do stuff. And the book is wonderful, but sometimes you just want a little bit extra support and have almost like a coach or someone that can help guide you, keep you focused, coming back for more.
Yeah, and our goal is to inspire and empower parents as well.
Yeah.
So,
love it. So where can our listeners, we talked about a lot, you've got a lot going on. Where can our listeners find out more about your work? And where can they buy the book?
So the book is available. If you go to my website at makesociallearningstick.com, there's a page on the book, and it'll take you you can purchase it at Generation Mindful. There's the book and the cards there too. And then that's where the course is as well. But my website is a hub for being able to funnel to those various places.
Is it sold on Amazon as well?
It is on Amazon. Yes. The black and white version is on Amazon. And then the color, the pretty version is with Generation Mindful.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
Yes. So if you don't care, then black and white, but I love the color version because it's got all these sections that divide it up and whatnot.
I saw it looks like it's probably easy to digest, almost like diagrams. I'm a visual learner, so
me too.
That kind of thing helps me.
Yeah, it's chunked out. It's a lot of information, but you can just open a page and start with one activity.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with the Brain Possible community today to be complete?
Thank you for asking that. I think that just you are the expert as parents. And, yes, we can seek guidance from people like me and other professionals, but your child, yourself, and honing in on your values and really knowing that unconditional love and showing up and just having a family where everybody feels significant and they feel like they belong is number one.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Can't say that enough.
Right. So important.
Well, I think that covers it. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and for rescheduling this so quickly.
You're welcome. I'm grateful for being here, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I hope that you enjoyed our conversation today and that you learned something new. Do you have a question for Elizabeth? Are you thinking of picking up the book? If so, we would love to hear what stood out to you. Email us at info@thebrainpossible.com. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share our podcast if that feels true for you. You may also consider visiting our website for more information on stories, therapies, and products that we think that you will love and support you on your journey of health and wellness. As always, thank you for spending your precious time with us at The Brain Possible. See you next week.